Hello, my name is Dave Glover. Today, I'd like to talk to you about working with meta keys. Now, we're going to be covering two topics in particular. One of those is adding custom meta keys, and then the second one is adjusting indexes. For the first topic in adding custom meta keys, there may be reasons why you need to do this. One, you may be creating a new log parser, and you need to assign keys that are just not in the system. Or second, you may be importing and setting up a feed or an application rule, and any of these may require custom meta keys. How do we go about adding them to the NetWitness system? Depending upon whether it's a log decoder or a packet decoder, the procedure is very similar, with one extra step being needed on a log decoder. So let's jump in and take a look at what we need to do. After logging into the system, what we want to do is we want to actually go into the administration. Once we're there, we'll pick the decoder that we want to configure the additional meta keys on. To start with, I'll do this from a packet perspective, and then we'll move on to the log side. So let's go over here, go to my packet decoder, and what I'll do is I'll do a view configure. And let's go over to my application rules. So whether it's a feed or an application rule, the procedure is the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go in here and create a new application rule. After clicking on the plus, we'll go ahead and give this application rule a name. So for our case, we'll just type in test. What's the condition that we would like to look for? In our case, we'll do something very simple, such as ip.source exists. Once I do that, I want to click alert. And here is where I have the list of keys that are available in the system. This is also where I would go to put in my custom key as well. What I will do is just remove the values that are there and type in the key I'd like to use. So for this very simple example, I'll just do ip.source exists, and I want to alert on my key. When you click alert, all that does is write the name of the rule into the key when the condition is met. So alert in this case doesn't mean any sort of notifications or anything in respond. It simply means when this condition exists, add the word test to my.key. Click OK, click apply, and then I would go apply that. And in that case, that key is now going to be written to. It will not be available to you in Investigator yet. There is one additional step that we need to take, which is to choose how we index that value. Or do we index that value? What we need to do now is click on Change Service, and we need to go to our packet concentrator, or any concentrator for that matter that's receiving that data. And again, we want to go on to Configure, we want to click on Files, and we want to pick the Index Concentrator Custom file. This file contains any additions or changes you made to the way that NetWitness indexes meta keys. So let's scroll down, and you'll see here, now I have a lot of additional values here, but we'll see that says please insert your custom meta keys or modifications below this line. What I'll do is I'll jump to the bottom, and what I want to do is I will actually copy this bottom line just to make sure that I get my correct syntax, and I'm going to paste it below. Once that's pasted, now we can go in and make the changes that are relevant for the key that we want to choose. So the key description, this is what is shown in Investigator. If you make spelling errors here, they will be accepted, and those spelling errors will be present in Investigator. So just keep that in mind. So I'll just put in my key here. The name is the actual key name that you chose when you created the application rule or feed. So in our case, it's just my.key. The format, we need to be careful on this. So we want to make sure that this is text, because it's just a standard text meta key. And now we have level, indexed values, index keys, or index none. Let's talk about those for just a second. When I choose index values, what that will do is that will index up to 1,000 unique values for that index slice. If I choose index none, what it will do is it will not index any values at all. If they're not indexed, you can't search on them in Investigator. You can't use them in the where clause on a report. The other option is index key. If you choose to index the key, when you go in Investigator, all you'll be able to see is whether the key has data in it or not the individual values. If you go and create a report, you would basically say, my key exists or not exists. There are cases for that for what we're trying to do here, I'm actually going to choose index values. Index values is actually what I choose for almost everything that I do. Now what we need to do is we need to come up with a value max. This is the maximum number of unique values that can be contained within an index slice. Now typically an index slice is based upon a number of values in the database, and then it'll roll over to a new index file, and it starts this number all over again. If you only were going to use 1 or 2 additional values, you may change that value max down to 10. So in our case, all we did was write the word test into the my key. So we could only ever have one unique value in there. So theoretically, we could put the value max at 1. Now, if we look at other types of data, let's say we're setting up this for source ports or destination ports. Now, these are set up out of the box, so we don't need to touch them. But what we would do is we'd do a value max of about 65,000 because we know that there can be no more than roughly 65,000 port numbers. Now, in the case of IP source, IP destination, if you're, have your websites open to the world, you may exceed some of the default values, in which case you need to bump those numbers. The way that these value maxes work, they are not pre-allocated for space. However, the more or larger that you make that value max, the more impact it can have on storage on the concentrators. This is a necessary evil sometimes, and it's a trade-off. I need to be able to have all these values indexed, but it's going to require more storage space. So that's just something to keep in mind when you start making these indexes very, very large. For example, some of the keys that I know we get hit on a lot of times are things like event description or alias host, and you end up making those numbers large. It will work, it'll work just fine. You just need to keep in mind that there is an impact to storage. We've gone ahead and add these and we click apply. Typically what you would do if you have more than one concentrator, you will actually go ahead and hit this push key and then pick and choose all the concentrators that you have. Therefore, all the concentrators are running the same index files. What happens if you don't? What happens if you just put them on this concentrator, not that one? When you go look at this data in investigation, focus on the broker, a lot of times you'll get a red SDK error, value not defined or key not defined. That happens when you have some of these in a concentrator over here, but not a concentrator over there. So best practice is really to run the same index file across all of the concentrators that you have, regardless of whether they're collecting log data or packet data. If there's no data to index, there's no penalty because we don't pre-allocate space. We'll get into looking at the values and seeing how many you have in your index files or in your indexes and the database a little bit later on in this webinar as well. So we've got this now set. We click apply. We've pushed this to our other concentrators. And how do we make this actually take effect? Well, there's 2 ways you can do that. One, we can go back to the system page and we can click shut down service. What this will do is this will actually stop the concentrator service and restart it. Part of the restarting is actually spin up a new index file, take a look at the configurations, and build it appropriately. This is actually the way I don't prefer to do it. The way I prefer to do it is actually go in System, Explore, do a right click on Index, Properties, and what we do is we want to click here and click Save, and then we click Send. Now you would have to do this on all of your concentrators, and here's a quick little way to do that. If you click on Change Service, and this is really the only place you can actually do this, if I go ahead and select my different concentrators, click on View, you'll notice that Explore is the only thing that's available for you. And what this is actually going to do is it's actually going to go read all the concentrators that you've selected, right click on Index Properties, same thing as we did before, and what you'll have is you'll see the 2 different concentrators that you have, or however many you checked. We want to click on Save, and we want to click All, because what I want to do is I want to issue this command to all of my concentrators. And then I click Send. And what you'll see here in the response output is both concentrators responded saying that they're going ahead and saving the indexes. While that's doing its thing, let's actually go over now to the log decoder. The log decoder is a little bit different. We need to make one additional step. This will also come into play if you're building custom meta keys for log parsing. So let's jump into the log parsing tool for just a moment, and I'll show you exactly what I'm referring to. In this parser that I have built, you'll see that we actually have a bunch of keys that we've already defined. This is actually one I built in one of my parsing exercises. But let's say, for example, the action, I wanted to put someplace else, right? I didn't want to use an out-of-the-box key like action here. I can very easily use my action, or I could put in anything. Where I typically find that I need to create new keys is on databases and a few other custom applications that really have nothing to do with security, but we want to bring that data in. So maybe I have a transaction number or something else along those lines. But in this case, I've now used a my_action meta key within this parser. How do I make this work within NetWitness? It'll be basically the same thing as we did when we created an application rule with one extra step. Let's actually jump over to our log decoder. We want to go to configure, we want to go to files. Now before, we actually made changes to the index concentrator custom file. In this case, we need to actually make them to the table map custom. So let's go to the bottom, and what we want to do is we want to copy over one of these lines here that we have already. I selected the bottom line, and I go ahead here and pasted. What I want to do is the envision name is the name of the key that you chose. So if you remember from what we were just looking at, we chose my action. The envision name will be my_action, so that'll be the same one that I just picked. The NW name or NetWitness name will be the name that you want to actually bring into the concentrator for indexing and so forth. Typically what I do is I'll use underscores in the parsers and dots within the NetWitness names. So we'll do my.action. At that point, we're set with the table map. So at this point, it'll take that value out of the parser and it'll make it available to the concentrator. Much the same way we had to restart things on a concentrator to get to read the configuration files, it's going to be the same thing here. And what you can do within this log decoder is you can actually click on shutdown service. This is not the way I like to do it. The reason being, when this service is shut down, any inbound syslog messages will get lost because the syslog receiver is not listening. In the case of virtual log collector, if you have those, well, they'll just queue up the messages and wait for the log decoder to come back online. Once they do, everything will come across. But if you do have any syslog messages inbound for the log decoder, when you hit this shutdown service, it actually will stop the listener and you'll lose anything in transit. At least anything coming over UDP syslog. If you have TCP, those will retry and you'll be okay there. The preferential way that I like to do this, going back into Explore, we open up Decoder, we do a right click on parsers, click on properties, and what we want to do is we want to pick reload. Click send, parsers have been reloaded. In addition to parsers being reloaded, any of those configuration files will be reloaded as well. At this point, we have that key being available to the concentrator. Well, what do we need to do? Much the same way what we just did on that other concentrator when we were adding in custom keys, we need to do the same thing here. So jump back into configuration of the concentrator, click on files, index concentrator custom. Again, I like to just zip to the bottom and copy the bottom line or wherever you'd like to put it. Key description, again, whatever I want to put in. This has no relevance to the actual key. It's just a friendly name that gets shown in the investigation module. And what's the name? So if you remember, we did my.action. If I had picked my_action or typed that in, that would not have worked because the NW name in the table map was relevant and cross-references to the NW or to the name here, which is my.action. And again, we have our value max here. In this case, this is set to 1,000,000, but again, I can put it to anything I want. Click apply. I would push that to my other concentrators. And once I get that done, same thing. I go to the Explore module, right click on index, click properties, click save, and then send. Once I do that, that key will now be available to within the investigation module. Let's now talk about adjusting index sizes. Where do I even start? The first thing you want to do is you want to jump into health and wellness and you want to look for this rule name here, meta overflow of index slices. And it'll actually tell you what the key is. So if we scroll over here, we see that the value is streams. So that's the key that I know that's overflown. By how much? I don't know. All I know, this is just a trigger that says you have more values than what you have defined as a max. So when we looked at the key that I did earlier, I said we only had one unique value. So really I could have lifted it at an index value of 1. Well, what happens if I actually put 2 unique values in there? Maybe I have another application rule that writes additional data into that key. Well, I'd see something very similar to this. Meta key is overflown. And in this case, it's streams. Where do I go? We know the meta key that we have. We have it in the streams and we have it on the packet hybrid. So let's actually start there. Let's go to services. And what we want to do is we want to go over to my packet hybrid to take a look at what the index levels are. So in that case, we're going to go over to our network concentrator. We're going to go to configure, files, and if you remember correctly, we were in the index concentrator custom file before. So we can go over here and we can see if streams exists. Now in this case, when I type in streams, it doesn't exist because it doesn't exist in the custom file, which means we need to go to the out of the box file, which is just index concentrator file. And if we do our search, we see here, this is the Lime streams info, and we see a value max of 2. What we might want to do is we might want to jump that to 4 or 8 or 10, and then hope that that will actually alleviate that overflown piece or that overflown message. What happens, or what's the result of an overflown meta? Let me pull up Notepad and we'll just walk through a very, very simple example. So in our case, we're going to use a username key. And the username key has a value max of 3. Through collecting logs or network traffic, I've accumulated some usernames. So we'll do Alice, Bob, and Mary. Now in that case, we've received 3 usernames. We have a value max of 3 usernames. I can go into investigation and I can say where user equals Mary, and I'll pull back values. I'll pull back everything that Mary did. Much the same way, if I create a report, I can say where username equals Mary, I'll bring back all the activity that Mary did. What happens if we get another username? We now have Tom. Now the problem is Tom is outside of the 3. In this example, we're going to be living in a single index file. They get redone and the indexes get redone every time they get spun. But for this example, we're going to use a single index file and how this behaves. So in this case, Tom is number 4. In health and wellness, we would have gotten a metakeys overflown for username. But what does this really mean for the analyst? If I type in where user equals Tom, I'll get 0 results. Because Tom is not indexed, I won't be able to come back with anything when I do searches for Tom. Now, if I search for an IP address and Tom is associated with it, it'll show up there because I'm not using the username as the primary key in that search. But what will happen though, in this case, if I go search for anything with Tom, Tom's data will not be presented when I search for it because it's outside of the index. So how do I fix this? Well, I already got a message in health and wellness that said metakey overflown username. So what I may want to do is bump this to 10. How do I know what number to bump this to? It's really a trial and error of being able to move the number up to the point that it makes sense. Again, keep in mind the storage impact of changing these numbers. Now, changing it from 3 to 10, the storage impact will be negligible. But if you move it from 1 million to 12 million, well, now that could be a decent hit to your storage. So let's take a look at a script that I ran to actually show me what's going on my concentrator. Now, this script was written by Nishad Kasu. He's in our professional services team. And what it does is it actually queries the concentrator to let me know where I am for indexes. And not only that, where I am against the index roll, or when the file is going to roll and a new one's going to start, where it'll tell me, hey, you've got your 90% full, but the index is going to roll, in a couple hundred values. Oh, that's perfect. That's okay. But if I'm already bumping up against a limit, when the index file is in the first 10%, I know I have a problem. So let's take a look at this file now. From here, we can see things like, here's the key file name. Key file name, I've got 59,104 unique values. My value max is 100,000, or I'm 59% used. What the other part of the information that I need is how far into that index I am. So let's scroll down here to the bottom part of this block, and it says the above stats represent 10.2% of the current slice so far. So that means that in 10% of this database being filled for this slice, I am already 59% full, 10% usage. That kind of tells me that I'm going to be bumping up against this limit. And anything above that limit, I won't be able to search on. Now, if I have correlation rules set up, those are really outside of this. Those will still fire. The data will still go to ESA. No problem there. This is really around searching and running reports. What I may want to do is I may want to jump this value up. Maybe to 1 million, maybe 2 million if that key is relevant for me. And this is where I was saying that storage can become impacted. If I drop an additional 2 zeros on there. I'm now 10 million. If I fill this, I'm going to be storing a lot more index data than I was before. Now, that may be important for my job, and that's okay. So the impact to storage is required based upon me needing all of these values. Another one that typically will bounce up against these limits might be alias host or event description. But running the script really gives you a good idea on where you are for unique values, what your limits are, and then how far into the slice you are. So for example, if we take a look at domain, I've got 585 values. I have a limit of 100,000. I'm not even 1%, so I'm perfectly fine there. Again, if I needed to change these values, what I would do is I would go into the index concentrator custom file and make the changes. Now, in the case of this one here with streams, streams is only present in the index concentrator file. We highly recommend not making changes to the index concentrator file because they may be overwritten anytime you do an upgrade. So in that case, what I would do is I would copy that line out. I would jump to my index concentrator custom file, same kind of thing, go to the bottom, paste that in, make sure I have the value max that I want to use, click apply, and then save the indexes. The index concentrator custom file is the last one that loads, so any changes you want to make above the index concentrator file, you put here into the custom file. I hope that was useful. Thank you for your time.